afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Redberryweo here, and welcome back to another video. And in this video, I'm talking a little bit about pocket classes. Now, pocket classes, for those of you who do not know what those are, it's basically like you pull the class out of your pocket and you quick teach something to other people. Now, there are some instances where you plan ahead of time and you put together an agenda with a schedule and like specific objectives and you do all of that stuff. And sometimes you don't have time for that. Sometimes, like let's say at a CAP meeting, example, you've got a senior member who's slotted to teach an aerospace education block. And this senior member isn't able to show up for the meeting anymore because a business meeting went late. Right? It could happen anytime. And you need to have some kind of block for aerospace for an hour-long period during your meeting, and the person who is supposed to present isn't coming anymore. What do? That's when pocket classes come into play, where you put together quick lessons that, like, they're not too difficult to set up, they don't require a ton of materials, and you just put something out that is engaging and interesting while teaching important lessons to the cadets, even though you didn't have a lot of time to prepare and plan for it. So, quick anecdote from me of sometimes that I had to do pocket classes. When I was a cadet commander a few years ago, and before that, like, just as a general cadet staff member, there were several occasions where we didn't have someone to teach a class. Like that senior member going to a work meeting and not coming on time to the meeting happened pretty regularly, and there were instances where like it fell on the cadet staff to figure out what are we going to do during this block. Now, for those of you who are not aware, there is something in CAP Regulation 60-1 that says you need a certain number of hours of different curriculum per month. Now, it doesn't say what weeks you have to do those things, but you do have to do specific sets of curriculum, and a lot of squadrons have a battle rhythm of like the first week is aerospace, the second week is ES. ES isn't in the list of criteria that you need to have for cadet programs, but a lot of squadrons do have an ES block because ES is a core mission of Civil Air Patrol. And then you might have like a character development and leadership night, and then you might do like physical fitness, right? It's like your 4 main weeks of the month, and then the fifth week you're like, I don't know what we're gonna do for the meeting, but we might do something social, like mini golf. I don't know. But going back to it, so you have to have that curriculum for the entire month. And so, like I've discussed in a previous video about planning your squadron meetings, typically you want to have a plan 2 weeks in advance, if you can, for each class. And so if that senior member plans 2 weeks ahead of time, this is the class I'm going to teach. I'm going to teach about the history of space exploration. And none of your cadet staff are familiar enough with the history of space exploration to really be comfortable with presenting it. Then you may not be able to teach that topic anymore, but you still probably should do something with aerospace. So, what are a few things you could do? For me, when I faced this scenario, I was like, I need to figure out something that we could do. And I looked at the surroundings and what resources might be available, for one. And then for second, figuring out something that it could be hands-on so that the cadets still get something out of it. Even if there isn't a ton of information, it's hands-on and it's engaging. And we want the cadets to at least enjoy the meeting. The core part of it is learning and fun. And they have to go hand in hand, or else cadets really don't enjoy the meeting and they don't feel like they get anything out of it. So there were a few times. One time I had to do an aerospace lesson, and I was like, okay, we're going to do airplanes, paper airplanes, and we're going to talk about the physics behind why some paper airplanes are more effective than other paper airplanes. And then we had a paper airplane throwing competition afterwards. I also did a paper airplane making exercise, not immediately, I didn't do that, but I did an exercise of the tell, show, do method, where I taught a very specific type of paper airplane, a little bit more complicated than just the normal one. I taught it to a group of people, and then I taught a different paper airplane to the second group of people, and then I had each of those two groups of people show each other how to do the airplane based off of the tell, show, do method. So I would tell them, and I would show them how to make the airplane, and then they would do it. And they would have to show that they were proficient with doing the paper airplane. So that's just two examples of like a leadership class. I use paper airplanes, but like there was paper available. And then there's also that paper airplane class where we talked about just like physics in general and how gravity works and how lift works and like how maybe like making a little tear in the back of your wing could serve as like almost like an aileron or a flap. It depends on where it's located and what it's doing. But if you do not have the resources or the knowledge to teach a pocket class covering one of those topics that like 60-1 outlines, then you could always cover something that's been covered in a previous week and like do a review session of it, and maybe even doing a review of all of the classes you've done in the month or like the past few weeks, depending on when it's happening. And going over that material helps refresh people so that they are less likely to forget that information in the long term. And there's also just generally going over uniform standards or customs and courtesies, chain of command. Like all of those things people could always use a good review of, especially with chain of command stuff. Like I know my unit initially when I first joined, they made us do chain of command quizzes like every week. And I don't know why. It felt like we were doing it almost every week. And they were like, you need to know the chain of command. I was like, okay, I got it now. But over time, it became less of a priority because, well, I don't know why. I was just a member, just doing my thing. But it became less of a priority over time. And people started to not know, like, who is the Secretary of the Air Force or the Chief of Staff. So I think those are useful things for CAP members to know. So if you do see said person, then you can acknowledge and know who that person is. You know? So those are just a few things that you could consider doing pocket classes on. And there's also drill and ceremonies. When it comes to drill does count as leadership. It does count as leadership contact hours. So that's fine. But also be aware of who the audience is, who is attending the meeting, in addition to what skills they have, and how do you make it interesting. There are some units where I've seen them do cat and mouse, where they've got one flight and then another flight, and then the one flight has to try to catch the other flight. Cool. If you don't have enough people, then that's a little bit harder, but if you have enough space for it in an outdoor space, or even in a building, it doesn't work as well in a building, but you could do cat and mouse. But the purpose of cat and mouse, if you look at the objectives of it, catching the other flight, it isn't instilling excellence or precision of movements. It's run away from the other flight as quickly as you can while following drill commands. And sometimes you could add rules in, like if there is an incorrect maneuver or if someone moves incorrectly, your flight has to halt for a 3-second penalty. There's a whole lot of things you could do with that, but my recommendation is if you're doing that, like the cat and mouse thing, don't do the cat and mouse thing every meeting. Mix things up. Keep things fresh. You know? Like, you want your vegetables to be fresh. And also for drill and ceremonies, I've seen a lot of units do drill downs. And it's not just my unit. I've seen a lot of units just really be into drill downs. I don't know why. I mean, they're fun when you win, but if you don't win and they just make you stand on the side, then it's kind of wasting time that could be used more productively, right? Like if you are doing these facing movements and then you just turn the wrong way because you forget your left from your right, and they just make you sit to the side, is that fun? No. And then like you could do the maneuvers at the same time as the rest of the people, but like there's no chance of you winning, and it's like, but that's not the point of drill. The point of drill is just for everyone to be proficient and excellent, working together as a team, moving as one cohesive unit. And a drill down is like you are acting as an individual while performing these team-based maneuvers. So that's just my quick argument here. If you do drill downs, that's fine if you do them occasionally. But if people feel like they're not getting anything out of it, then you're losing productivity at your meetings, if that makes sense. And then there's also like bearing tests. I'm not a huge fan of those either. They're useful to a certain degree. Like some of the military branches use like bearing tests where they have like the rubber chickens and they're wah, wah, and they squeeze those. I guess that's my impression of one of the rubber chickens. Sure, they use those, but they're not always doing that. They've taught the expectation and set the standard first of how to stand at attention properly. But standing at attention for 20 minutes also isn't productive because it's like just everyone standing in a line, just kind of doing their thing. So that's another one where I'm like, you could do it, but you need to make sure that there is a training purpose behind it and that it's actually using as many people's time effectively enough to make it worth doing the actual exercise. And so if you think of like an encampment setting, there are tons of opportunities to do pocket classes, and there are different resources that you can do pocket classes on. Like most encampments, they have a specific standard operating procedures booklet, which is like normally like this big. And then there's also an encampment handbook for students specifically, which has knowledge that they are supposed to be learning over the course of the week, like the different achievements and who they're named after, why they are named after them, and additional like aerospace related information as well. It's a great little booklet. It has a lot of information in it. But you can do pocket classes on the material if you are a flight staff member. That's a great thing to cover, because if they are being quizzed on that material by someone who is doing inspections, then they should be able to bring that knowledge back to their unit. And so by quizzing them and actively working to review and teach them that material, you are helping them facilitate that learning process. And like some people don't quite understand the uniform standards when they do start attending encampment, like what direction do you wear your belt? What the difference between a male and a female belt buckle is, or like belt for blues. I didn't learn about it until recently, or at least I might have learned it and then forgotten and then relearned. But like, for example, the male belt buckle is about this thick, and then the female one is about this thick. It's like half an inch thinner, and it's the same length. I was like, what? And I found out that I have a male belt, and I was like, I didn't know that. Cool. But it does the same purpose, and it's like in the regulation it doesn't really matter if you have a male or female belt. It doesn't say that. But that's just a little factoid where I was like, what? And it wasn't until I was in CAP for probably about, I'm gonna have to say, almost 4 years. Wait, thinking. Yeah, it was almost 4 years before I actually learned how to wear my blues belt properly. Because you know how, like, the tip of your belt, like, let's say, like, this is the end of your belt, and then this is, like, the buckle right here. It's supposed to only be, like, a tiny sliver of silver poking out, and that's it. Like, it doesn't wrap around your body. And because I was such, like, a tiny person, and because, like, being a little 12-year-old, the belt didn't fit me, I had it wrapped all the way around to, like, my back. And I wore it like that until I attended an NCSA. And at the NCSA, they were like, what are you doing with your belt? And I even remember the guy's name, but I'm not going to say it for his privacy. But he was like, you do understand you are wearing your blues belt incorrectly. And I was like, huh? Wait, maybe it was 3 years. But still, like, it was a number of years before I actually learned how to wear the blues belt correctly. So, by learning the standards, by reviewing regulations, you could teach things to other people that they may not already know. And you could also use the people around you. So, when you are at a squadron meeting, at encampment, at an activity, utilize the people in your group, because some people may be more experienced than others. Like if you have an older student that may have done a public speaking course at some point, they could help teach like how to do impromptu briefings. That's a great skill. Speaking extemporaneously or in like an impromptu setting, even though you are technically speaking in an impromptu setting, you can have someone else do an impromptu briefing in that impromptu briefing, which is pretty cool. So that's just a few things that I wanted to cover for Pocket classes. One last thing, it's okay to take initiative. And looking at where the areas of your team could improve and addressing those by having Pocket classes available. So if like a class falls through, or like if you're on encampment and it's thunderstorming outside, you're stuck in the barracks and you can't go to the rappel tower, you need to do something with that time. So take that initiative, look at the strengths of your team, where the weaknesses might be, and utilize your people's strengths to support the overall team experience level and raise it up so that everyone gains that general experience. Also, making cadences is a fun thing that we used to do at encampment. Like, if you guys know, there's a lot of emergency vehicles outside of my window. 1 second. Okay, they're gone now. So, like, there was a cadence that we made based off of the Hunger Games theme, or not theme, but it was like, are you coming into Squadron 2? They say we would be on our flight, a marching 2 by 2. There are more emergency vehicles. Are they coming past my place? That was weird. Okay, sorry that there were fire trucks outside of my building. So I think we're good now. What was I saying? Yeah, utilize your team's strengths. That was I was singing the song. But anyway, so the cadence was fun to make, and well, I didn't make it. I was a squadron commander at the time, but it was a lot of fun to hear them because they would be standing in closing formation, and then they would be like, are you coming to Squadron 2? They say that we'd be on our flight, a marching 2 by 2. And like it was just like hauntingly beautiful. I loved it, and I was like, yeah, you go, guys, you're making beautiful cadences. So yeah, like that's another thing, just like team building exercises you can do as well. There's plenty of those that you could pull up. Like there's the levitating stick sort of thing, where like everyone's got their finger at the bottom of the stick. I'm using a pen as an example here. But the point is to bring the stick down to the floor, and they only can touch the bottom of it, and they have to keep their finger flat. And so it's very challenging because everyone wants to lift it up just a little bit more to make sure that their finger is touching the pen. Or, well, in this instance, my finger's touching the pen. But they just need to bring their fingers down at the same time. But anyway, so like there's a lot of different activities that you can do as Pocket classes. Like you could always look up online team building exercises. That's something that's fun because it always covers the leadership block. But if you can cover the other categories of like contact hours, especially with aerospace, being familiar with aerospace knowledge can also be very beneficial and educational to those who don't have that experience yet. So that's just quick video. I know it went a little bit longer than I was actually expecting, but that's all for Pocket classes, guys. So if you have personally done a Pocket class, or if you have ideas for Pocket classes that you would love to do, please feel free to include them in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and that is all, folks. Until next time, toodles.